You know, when you watch a nature documentary and you see, like, two bighorn sheep crashing their skulls together on a mountain
Oh,
edge,
yeah.
or a pack of wolves fighting fiercely over a fresh carcass, there is this underlying expectation of boundaries.
Right.
It is like they have an unspoken evolutionary agreement. They fight until the social hierarchy is set, or, the territory is secured, or the food is claimed, and then the violence just stops. It has a limit.
Exactly, because it is governed entirely by biological necessity.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it looks brutal to us, sure, but it is bound by very strict pragmatic rules.
Yeah.
It ensures the survival of the individual or the survival of the species. Nature is just incredibly efficient that way. It doesn't waste energy on violence for the sake of violence.
Right, which makes complete sense. But then you look at humans, and suddenly all those natural laws are just broken.
Yeah, completely thrown out the window.
As the Nobel Prize-winning ethologist Nico Tinbergen pointed out in our source material today, while many species fight, man is the only species that is a mass murderer. Yeah, he actually called us the only misfit in his own society.
That is a powerful way to phrase it.
It really is. And, why are we the outlier? That is exactly what we are figuring out in today's deep dive. We are exploring one of the most haunting questions of human existence. Basically, how can we explain man's lust for cruelty?
Yeah.
We are unpacking Erich Fromm's monumental 1973 book, The Anatomy of Human Destructiveness. And for you listening, we're going to shortcut your path to understanding this massive, it's a 500-plus page synthesis of psychoanalysis, neurophysiology, anthropology, and animal psychology.
It is a phenomenal text, but to truly grasp Fromm's perspective, we really can't just jump straight into his theory.
Right, we need the context.
Exactly. We first have to understand the intellectual battlefield he was stepping onto in the 1970s. When Fromm was writing this, society was essentially split between two massive, competing, and entirely contradictory psychological theories regarding human nature.
Oh, wait. Let's unpack this. It was like society was given a terrible multiple-choice question to explain why we do awful things.
Yeah.
Let's look at option A, the instinctivists. This camp was championed by people like Konrad Lorenz, right?
Right.
And they argued that human destructiveness is an inherited innate animal instinct. They use this thing called the hydraulic model, basically claiming that aggression builds up inside us constantly, like steam in a pressure cooker.
Yep.
And eventually, it just has to blow. So in their view, wars and cruelty are caused by this unstoppable evolutionary drive to kill.
Exactly. What is fascinating here is the idea that we are biologically programmed for aggression, and it operates completely independently of what is happening around us. We are just waiting for the right trigger, or sometimes no trigger at all, for that aggressive energy to be discharged.
But wait, I have to stop you there, because earlier, before we started recording, you mentioned that Lorenz's instinct theory, despite sounding like a horror movie where we are all just ticking time bombs, actually became this incredibly popular, almost soothing ideology for people.
It did, yeah.
I just don't get that. How is being told we are bloodthirsty, natural-born killers soothing?
Well, think about the psychological relief of helplessness.
Okay.
If we are genetically doomed to be violent by our animal ancestors, right? If this aggression is just a biological pressure cooker that we cannot control, then we have the ultimate excuse for our impotence to stop it.
Oh, wow.
We don't have to feel guilty.
Yeah.
If war is just biology, then you and I aren't responsible for fixing the irrational social structures or the economic inequalities or the political systems that actually cause war. It is a rationalization.
Oh, I see. So it completely absolves us. We can just throw our hands up and say, hey, boys will be boys, humans will be humans. It is just nature.
Precisely. It removes all moral and societal responsibility. Now, contrast that with option B, which is the behaviorists.
Led most famously by B.F. Skinner.
Right, and they argue the exact opposite of the instinctivists. Skinner claimed that there are absolutely no innate human traits at all. None.
Clearly, none.
None. No human nature, no built-in drives. In behaviorism, everything we do is the result of social conditioning.
Right. This is the classic Skinner box concept.
Exactly.
They put a rat in a box. If it presses a lever, it gets a food pellet. If it does the wrong thing, it gets a mild shock. And eventually you can program the rat to do whatever you want.
Yes.
And Skinner basically said humans are no different. We are just massive, complicated blank slates responding to stimuli, rewards, and punishments. Like, we are automatons.
And just like Lorenz's theory appealed to our desire to avoid responsibility, Skinner's behaviorism perfectly fit the modern, industrial, what Fromm calls the cerebrally oriented society.
Wait, cerebrally oriented, that sounds very academic. What does that actually mean?
Well, it means a society that operates purely from the head, ignoring the heart or the gut. Think about the height of the Industrial Revolution or even, modern corporate culture today. We live in a world that increasingly treats people like mechanical things. We value efficiency, predictable output, and metrics over human feeling.
Right, yeah.
Skinnerism removes the subjective emotional experience entirely. It views human emotions as useless baggage. If someone is acting out, you don't explore their deep existential pain. You just tweak their incentive structure.
You just fix the spreadsheet.
Exactly.
So option A says, we are bloodthirsty werewolves driven by our biology. Option B says we are blank slate robots programmed by society. Both options completely erase human free will and emotion.
They do.
And honestly, if Skinner and Lorenz are both wrong, then how do we explain the massive difference in human behavior? I mean, how do we categorize the difference between a mother bear defending her cubs and a dictator systematically torturing dissidents?
Right.
Because they clearly cannot stem from the same mechanism.
No, they can't. And this is exactly where Fromm breaks new ground. He realizes that using the single blanket word aggression to describe both of those scenarios creates hopeless confusion.
Yeah, I can see that.
Using the same word for a man defending his life against a mugger, a mountain climber aggressively tackling a peak, and a sadist torturing a prisoner, it is scientifically useless. So he divides the concept entirely. He splits it into benign aggression and malignant aggression.
Okay, so let's break those down. The benign kind is defensive aggression. This is the stuff we actually do share with animals. Fromm says it is phylogenetically programmed.
Yes.
Which is basically a fancy way of saying it is baked into our evolutionary hardware. It is there to make us attack or flee when our vital interests, like our lives, our offspring, our territory, are actively threatened.
The crucial distinction with benign aggression is that it is biologically adaptive. It serves a very specific practical purpose, which is the survival of the individual and the species. And most importantly, linking back to your nature documentary analogy at the start, it ceases the absolute second the threat is gone.
But wait a second, I'm sure people listening are thinking exactly what I'm thinking. Don't animals kill?
Yeah.
If we evolved from animals and we have defensive aggression, isn't it entirely logical that we just inherited a sharper, deadlier version of their hunting instinct? Like we just got smarter and better at it.
And it's the most common assumption, but Fromm dove deep into neurophysiology, paleontology, and animal behavior to prove that assumption wrong.
Really?
Yeah. Mammals, and especially our closest primate relatives, absolutely possess defensive aggression. They will fight ferociously to survive. But they are not killers and torturers.
Okay.
If you study chimpanzees or gorillas in the wild, when they aren't actively threatened, they do not engage in mass slaughter for the thrill of it. They don't set up torture camps for other chimpanzees. Malignant aggression, which is destructiveness and cruelty for its own sake, is not an animal instinct gone wrong. It is something entirely new on the evolutionary timeline, and it is uniquely human.
Wow. So malignant aggression is not programmed by evolution.
No.
It is not biologically adaptive. It kills without any biological or social purpose, and its satisfaction is lustful. It brings a twisted kind of pleasure.
Yes, exactly.
Which brings us to the massive, glaring question at the center of this deep dive. If malignant aggression isn't a biological animal instinct, and it is not just a behavior conditioned by a bad environment, then where on earth does it come from?
To answer that, Fromm introduces the concept of character-rooted human passions.
Character-rooted passions.
Yes. And to understand why this was such a breakthrough, we have to look at how he challenges Sigmund Freud.
Oh, Freud, always Freud.
Right. Freud, for all his brilliance, tried to force all human passions into a biological straitjacket. Initially, Freud argued everything was driven by the libido, basically sexual energy.
Right.
Later, when he witnessed the horrors of World War I, he realized the libido couldn't explain trenches and mustard gas, so he introduced the death instinct, but he still tied it back to a physiological, organic drive.
It is like trying to explain the emotional impact of a Beethoven symphony by only talking about the acoustic properties of wood and strings.
That is a great analogy.
You're missing the magic and the tragedy of the human experience. From separates our organic physiological drives, like the literal hunger for food or the need for sleep, from our character-rooted passions, like love, ambition, greed, and destructiveness.
Yes, because organic drives serve physical survival. You will literally die if you don't eat.
Yeah.
But you don't physically die if you aren't famous. or if you aren't powerful, or if you don't have art in your life.
Yeah.
Yet people will willingly lay down their lives for those passions.
That is so true. Why is that?
Because these passions are humanity's attempt to make sense of life. We are uniquely aware of our own existence. We know we are going to die. We feel isolated, which means we can't just exist as a feeding or propagating machine.
Right. We need more.
Exactly. We desperately need a frame of orientation. We need an object of devotion.
The text features this brilliant quote from the 18th century philosopher von Holbach. He said, "A man without passions or desires would cease to be a man."
And that raises the fundamental crisis of the human condition. We all have this existential hunger to belong, to feel effective, to leave a mark.
Yeah.
What happens when a person cannot fulfill these passions in a healthy way? What happens when an individual feels so profoundly powerless, so alienated from society, that they cannot find meaning through love or art or building something?
So what does this all mean? It's like an existential hunger rather than a physical one. If a person feels impotent and cannot satisfy their need to make a dent in the world through love or creation, they achieve that intensity through destruction.
Yes.
It is a dark substitute for meaning.
That is the core mechanism. Freeman points out this great tragic paradox. Human destructiveness is actually life turning against itself in a desperate striving to make sense of life. It is the only true perversion. Even the most sadistic, destructive man is attempting to answer the challenge of being born human. He hasn't stopped seeking meaning. He has just taken a terribly wrong, twisted path to his salvation.
And Fromm doesn't just leave this as an abstract theory. He dives into the darkest expressions of these passions, breaking them down primarily into sadism and necrophilia.
He does.
And we need to look at how these actually function in the real world. Let's start with sadism. He defines it not necessarily in the sexual sense we often think of, but as the passion for unrestricted power over a sentient being.
Right, it's the craving to transform a man into a thing, to have absolute godlike control over the life and death of another person.
He uses Joseph Stalin and Heinrich Himmler as his clinical case studies for this.
Okay.
And what's fascinating and really terrifying is how bureaucratic their cruelty was. Stalin wasn't like a territorial wolf bearing his fangs. His sadism was meticulous.
Very calculated.
Exactly. The mechanism was absolute control over the Soviet state apparatus, deciding with a stroke of a pen who would be sent to the gulag and who would be spared. It was about proving to himself that he held the power of a deity over sentient life.
And then there is necrophilia, which Fromm considers the most malignant form of human destructiveness.
Okay, let's get into this one.
Again, he expands this way beyond the traditional literal definition. He defines the necrophilous character as having a passion to destroy life and a deep, consuming attraction to all that is dead, decaying, unalive, or purely mechanical.
And his prime clinical case for this is Adolf Hitler.
Yes.
When you look at Hitler through Fromm's lens of necrophilia, the history suddenly makes a different, much darker kind of sense. Hitler wasn't defending Germany's vital interests like a defensive animal.
Not at all.
He was driven by a deep passion to turn everything living into something dead and mechanical. Look at his obsession with architecture.
That is the perfect example. Hitler was famously obsessed with building massive, imposing stone monuments, and he would spend hours looking at miniature, lifeless architectural models with Albert Speer.
Right.
He preferred the cold, rigid, unalive stone to the messy, spontaneous reality of living human beings.
And you see the ultimate expression of that necrophilia at the end of the war with the Nero Decree.
Oh, absolutely.
When it was clear Germany had lost, a normal, biologically adaptive leader would surrender to preserve the lives of his people. But Hitler ordered the destruction of Germany's own infrastructure, its factories, its bridges, its water supplies.
Yeah.
If he couldn't rule the machine, he wanted the whole nation reduced to rubble. It was the ultimate triumph of the dead over the living.
It proves that this behavior has absolutely nothing to do with animal survival instincts. But it also forces us to confront a difficult historical question.
Which is?
If these dark passions aren't built into our biology from the dawn of time, then how did we get here?
Right. We have to dismantle the myth of the savage caveman because we all have this cartoon image in our heads of early humans just constantly clubbing each other over the head, living in a constant state of barbaric warfare. We assume civilization tamed us.
But if destructiveness were truly an innate instinct, prehistory would be an absolute bloodbath. You would see constant warfare in the fossil record.
Right. There would be evidence everywhere.
But the evidence from paleontology and anthropology shows the exact opposite. Early hunter-gatherer societies were actually largely peaceful, cooperative, and egalitarian. They had defensive aggression, sure, but not malignant cruelty.
There's a really striking quote from J.C. Smuts that Fromm shares. He says, "When I look at history, I am a pessimist, but when I look at prehistory, I am an optimist."
It completely upends the narrative we're usually fed. Fromm's research shows that the degree of destructiveness actually increases with the development of civilization.
Here is where it gets really interesting. How does that work? How does getting more civilized make us more destructive?
Well, think about what civilization requires. The agricultural revolution led to surplus, which led to the division of labor.
Okay.
Suddenly you have hierarchies. You have kings and peasants. You have the rise of the state, cities, and standing armies.
Right, the social structures change.
Exactly. These complex social structures created massive inequality and alienated people from the products of their labor. They generated the very conditions, like powerlessness, isolation, and strict social control, that allow malignant aggression and these dark passions to thrive.
Which means this isn't just a history lesson about ancient Mesopotamia or World War II dictators. Fromm connects this directly to us today.
He does.
He warns of an increasing subtle sensitivity to necrophilia in our modern cybernetic industrial society.
Yes.
He points to a growing cultural fascination with the unalive and the mechanical over the natural and the living. He even mentions Marinetti's Futurist Manifesto, which explicitly glorified machines, speed, and war. Or the Falangist motto from the Spanish Civil War, "Long live death." So, let me get the mechanism straight here. As we get more advanced and increasingly surrounded by machines and rigid systems, we actually risk feeding this necrophilic passion. We are literally building the conditions for our own destructiveness.
If we connect this to the bigger picture and we look closely at the society we're building, that is exactly Fromm's warning. In a society where the ultimate goal is the conquest of nature by the machine, the living person becomes a mere appendix to the machine.
Wow.
We start to value strict order, efficiency, and predictability above all else. We want humans to act like predictable algorithms.
We prioritize the spreadsheet over the human being, the system over the soul.
Yes. And this is why Fromm insists that understanding this cruelty isn't about morbid fascination or condoning it. It is about realizing that radical changes in our social structures are needed to reinstate man as the supreme focus.
Right.
We have to actively, consciously mobilize what he calls biophilia, the love of life. Because we don't design societies that nurture the love of life. The love of the dead and the mechanical will rush in to fill the void.
Let's bring this all together for you listening, because we have covered a massive amount of ground today, navigating between biology, psychology, and history.
It is a lot to take in.
It is, but the big takeaways here are profound. First, we are not genetically hardwired for war and cruelty. Sorry, instinctivists. The pressure cooker theory is a myth.
True.
But we are also not mere programmable robots devoid of inner life. Sorry, behaviorists. Our destructiveness is a uniquely human, character-rooted passion. It is a tragic misdirection of our fundamental existential need to make sense of our lives and to feel that we have an impact on the world.
And recognizing the difference between that natural defensive aggression we share with animals and the malignant cruelty that is unique to humans is the very first step in actively choosing biophilia.
Yeah.
We have to consciously choose environments that foster growth, freedom, and human connection, rather than environments that make us feel powerless, isolated, and reduced to mere cogs in a machine.
Which brings us to a final, provocative thought we want to leave you with. Fromm warned way back in 1973 that our cybernetic industrial society was increasing our necrophilia, our attraction to the purely mechanical over the living.
Yeah, and think about that today.
Exactly. Think about that through the lens of today. As we spend the vast majority of our waking hours staring into glowing, lifeless digital screens, as we communicate more and more through algorithms rather than physical human touch, and as we quantify every aspect of our lives, are we unwittingly designing a culture that starves our life-furthering passions? Are we quietly feeding our innate potential for destructiveness?
It is chilling. If Tinbergen called us the only misfit in our own society decades ago, you have to wonder how he would categorize us now, surrounded by the very machines Fromm warned us about.
We might not just be the mass murderers of the animal kingdom. We might be actively engineering the very society that guarantees we remain the ultimate misfit. Keep that in mind the next time you look at the boundary lines in a nature documentary, and compare them to the invisible ones we are drawing for ourselves every time we log on.